Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to look at online networks and how to analyze online networks with the tools from VOSON Lab. And we have 3 speakers today. Hopefully they'll all be able to speak, but definitely answer questions at the end. So.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name's Rob Ackland. I lead the VOSON Lab and we're based at the School of Sociology at the Australian National University. And I'm here with my colleague, Francisca Borges. Unfortunately, you can't see us because of technical issues. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we're presenting from today. So these are the lands of the Ngunnawal and also Ngambri people. And we pay our respects to the elders past and present. Next slide, please, Brian. So this is a shot of the building that we're located in, Francisca and I, but we have a colleague, Brian Gertzel, who's down in Melbourne. And actually, Brian is the only person from the VOSON Lab you can see. So firstly, I'd like to just apologise about the technical problems. We've done a lot of preparation, but the Zoom gremlins got us. However, everything else is going to go smoothly, although maybe I've jinxed us now, but anyway. So I'm going to talk very briefly just to give a basic overview of the VOSON Lab. What do we do? A bit of an overview of the tools. And then I'm going to be handing it across to my colleagues, Francisca and Brian, who will give a demonstration of the VOSON tools. Next slide, please, Brian. So the VOSON Lab, what do we do? Well, we study online networks from an empirical social science perspective, in particular, social network analysis. We've been doing this since the early 2000s. The first VOSON software was designed for collecting and analysing hyperlink networks. As the web evolved, so has the VOSON Lab tools. They've also evolved. When Facebook came on, and then also Twitter, and so basically the VOSON is evolving. VOSON tools are evolving as the web evolves. Next slide, please, Brian. In terms of research, very briefly, on the left-hand side there, you can see a hyperlink network. This is a network of environmental activist websites. Each of the dots or nodes is a website, and the lines are hyperlinks that connect these websites. In this research, we manually coded the websites according to the issues of concern that they are focused on, and those are the color coding of the nodes you see there. And you see this very obvious clustering. On the right-hand side, there's another network with clustering. This is a network of abortion websites that are involved in the abortion debate in Australia, and they're color coded according to pro-life, pro-choice. And you can see a very clear sort of homophily there in the sense of a clustering on the basis of abortion stance. Next slide, please. On the right-hand side, there's an example of not digital visualization, but analog visualization. Jen Fullerton, who was an ANU Vice Chancellor's College Artist Fellow, so she came to the VOSON Lab because she was interested to visualize through her paper sculptures abuse that is directed towards Australian politicians on Twitter. And so the VOSON Lab provided her with a data set or analytics derived from that data set, and then she constructed these beautiful sculptures indicating the extent and severity of abuse being directed towards Australian politicians. And actually, I looked at the data, and some of the abuse was actually coming from the Australian politicians, which was kind of interesting. Next slide, please, Brian. The US presidential election, VOSON has been there. In the 2016 election, we collected a large-scale data set during the first debate, and that data set was used for various research projects. And an example there is a paper that was presented at the ICWSM conference, where we, with colleagues, computer science colleagues at the ANU, we looked at the influence of social bots in terms of their impact on diffusion of information on Twitter. And on the right-hand side, there's some information about a Volkswagen Foundation project that the VOSON Lab's involved in, where once again, we've collected large-scale data sets of Twitter Twitter conversations that were occurring during the debates. And there's a link to a coding blog post about that I'll mention later on. Next slide, please, Brian. In terms of the tools, the VOSON Lab tools are designed to be like a Swiss Army knife. What we enable is for researchers to have a common way of accessing and collecting data from social media platforms and also the World Wide Web. And also for these data to then be represented in what we call research-ready data sets. Namely, these are networks with the text embedded as node and edge attributes, and also what other attributes can be extracted from the social media platforms using APIs. Next slide, please. There are three core VOSON Lab packages. VoiceonSml is the flagship package that sits beneath everything else and does the collection and the creation of the networks. Next slide, please. VOSON Dash, well, you'll be seeing that very shortly. That's the user interface. And then finally, the next slide, please. VOSON TCN, this is a new software for collecting threaded conversations from Twitter using the version 2 API. Next slide, please. Well, okay, that's it from me. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague, Francisca, who will take you through a quick VOSON dashboard demonstration.
Thank you, Rob. Brian, I should be able to share my screen. So this is the VOSON Dashboard version 0.6 interface. The main interface contains in the top all the main menus and functionalities, and the left pane contains detailed functions, and this space over here where data visualizations and data tables are presented. With VOSON Dash, users can analyze networks collected with the tool or upload their own GraphML files. Using the browse, you can just upload your own GraphML files. But in this example, we will be using a package data set for replicability, the environmental activist website that Rob just mentioned. The environmental activist network contains 161 nodes representing environmental organizations' websites and 1,444 edges representing hyperlinks between these organizations. Text data is stored as node attribute, and categorical values were pre-assigned depending on the type of organization. There are two ways we can explore network data with VOSON Dashboard. Network data, where we have two data tables, vertices or nodes, wherein each row represents a node and each column represents a node attribute, like degree, in degree, betweenness, centrality, closeness, text, metadata collected, and type. And in the edges, each row represents an edge from website A to website B. Network visualization is available via two R packages, iGraph and BizNetwork. BizNetwork allows users to navigate, zoom in, zoom out, and reposition nodes. The network visualization pane contains 4 tabs, which provides functions to manipulate the network. We can modify nodes, for example, change sizes or assign size by in degree. We can modify edges. We can modify the layout of the graph, And we can also apply filters to the network. In this example, our network has 3 isolates, that is, nodes that are not connected to the network by other hyperlinks. We would like to remove the isolates, therefore we select that. And then we would like to assign categorical values to this network. We will select type, and there we get the nodes, node color representing type of organization, where purple is toxic, greens are globals, and orange are bias. It is possible to download a GraphML file or to plot a HTML, or simply to save the visualization. And the same can be done with the data tables, which can be downloaded in CSV or Excel. There are 3 ways we can analyze network with VOSON Dash. There are network metrics, assortativity metrics, and text analysis tools. The network metrics presents to the left social network analysis tools, metrics such as network size, network density, centrality measures, and distributions that can be selected, for example, by component. In this case, we have component size 1 because we've removed the isolates, by in degree or out degree, and in networks that are undirected networks or with undirected ties, we can observe degree distribution as well. Assortativity metrics are available for those networks with categorical node attributes. Like in this example, the categorical network attribute is type. We can observe the mixing matrix and population share of each type, homogeneity, and homophily indexes. Finally, we can conduct text analysis with VOSON Dash. So it's now processing the frequencies. And with this left pane, we can pre-process the text corpus. For example, in our analysis, we would like to remove the word food. We simply type it in and remove words as needed to process. Similarly, we can apply word stemming, remove URLs, numbers, or punctuation, which is quite useful working with other data sources like Twitter. And we can modify the display of the network, for example, to control how many words do we want to be appearing in this visualization. As our dataset contains the categorical value, we can also observe the words that have been utilized by other, by type of organization. Another way to visualize text is via word clouds, where the size of the text is proportional to the use of the term. Again, the results are presented for the whole network or by network type. By type of organization. And finally, the comparison cloud, which plots the words more clearly identified for each particular group using their color scheme. So those are the VOSON Dash main features for network data visualization and analysis, which are common to all data sources. Now, my colleague Brian Gertzel will conduct live collection with VOSON Dashboard. Thank you, Brian. Over to you.
Thanks, Francisca. If you just stop sharing, thank you. I'll just share my screen again. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm the face of VOSON Lab today. I'm usually behind the scenes, but we'll see how we go. There's two parts to my section of the presentation today. The first, we're having a look at how to use VOSON Dashboard to do some collection of social media networks. So we'll do a bit of a live demonstration. And the second part, we'll have a look at how to use our software programmatically to how you would use VoiceonSml to create a network in R. And I'll just get started. My first slide here is just a brief overview of our software. So this is kind of how it all fits together. We have VOSON Dash, which was kind of developed to originally as a tool to assist in teaching, but it's also a really nice interface which allows us to do exploratory collection and simple analysis. And we have VoiceonSml, on which VOSON Dash sits on top of, and that's our main library, which contains a number of functions which allow us to authenticate with APIs, collect data, and create networks. And we currently support collecting data from Twitter using the Twitter API, from YouTube using the YouTube Data API. We support collecting JSON data from the Reddit website, and we can also collect hyperlink data to create hyperlink networks from the web. We have this workflow with VoisonSml, which we have an interface to in VOSON Dashboard, and that's the authenticate, collect, and create workflow, where we authenticate with the API, we collect data, and then we create a network from the data we've collected. And here you can see those areas are represented in VOSON Dashboard. The top right here is an example of a search query for Twitter, the Twitter API, and you can see we can create some quite complex search queries to collect data from the APIs, and I'll show you those in a moment. VOSON software, we create two base network types generally from all of our social media sources. The first is an activity network, which is a network of activities. So for example, in a Reddit network, an activity would be a comment. So if we have a threaded conversation, we would call a comment an activity. And in that type of network, the nodes are activities or comments. So we have this kind of relationship where we have comments with ties directed to each other, these would be reply comments to perhaps the original comment on the left-hand side here. We have actor networks, and those are networks in which our nodes are the users or the actors within the network. An example of that in a Twitter network is we would have various users, and we would have more varied types of relationships between the users, and also bidirectional kind of communication, where, for example, this user might reply to this user here on the right, and whereas it might have a different relationship with this user on the left, where they might mention, or perhaps this user on the left might retweet this user in the middle. Okay, so let's jump into a bit of a live demonstration. I'm going to collect firstly a Reddit activity network, and then show you how to collect a Twitter actor network. And these are all going to be politics related. In Reddit, I'm going to collect a thread from the Australian politics subreddit, and for Twitter, I'll collect on the AusPoll hashtag, which is probably the most well used and well-known political hashtag for Australian politics. Okay, so I'll just jump over to VOSON Dashboard. As you would have seen with Francisca, this is our interface. I'm in the Reddit collection interface at the moment. It's very simple to use. We have our controls on the left-hand side. We have our console on the right-hand side. And the type of collection we do, I see we have video. Hello. The type of collection we do of Reddit threads is quite simple. An example might be you could go to the Reddit website, find threads that you're interested in, or you might use other software out there to conduct searches and find threads you're interested in. And you can simply copy a URL, for example, for the purposes of this demonstration. We can paste that into our field here. We click add. You can add multiple threads to combine them all into one network if you wish. Then we simply collect threads. And what that has done is we have some output here from VoiceonSml. We can see we only collected 20 comments from that thread. There were about 24 comments reported from Reddit, and that is because sometimes the websites or APIs don't make all of the data available for various reasons, because there's some unacceptable content or moderation going on. The data is collected and displayed in a data table down the bottom here, and we're able to firstly, you can either just download the raw data that was collected by clicking on the data button, or you can choose the fields you wish and export various other formats such as CSV. There's an option there. Now we wish to create a network. I'll show you how to create an activity network with Reddit today. Once we've collected data, we automatically hop over to this Create Network tab, and we can create two types of networks for Reddit. And first one's activity, as I mentioned, where the nodes are activities. We can add text into our network if we wish, and that will be added into our network if we wish to do some kind of text analysis later. I might just leave that unchecked for now, and we simply create network. Once that's done, we get a summary output of the nodes and edges in our network. We can also download our network in a data frame representation. If you're used to working in R, you can download an iGraph GraphML format file if you wish to work with GraphML outside of VOSON Dashboard. And you can also click the graph button, which will jump over into our graph analysis section. I might just turn on node labels. Here we can see this is the network, the thread we just collected. I'll just change the node size based on degree. Unsurprisingly, this is our original poster comment here in the center of the network. And with threaded conversations, we very often see this single component because logically all of the data we collect are related because they're all part of the same thread. And we get this branch-like structure with comments. These labels are comment IDs in this case. Okay, and as Francisca mentioned, we also have a Viz network representation where we can change some various other visual features of our plot. Might just quickly show you now a Twitter collection. I switch now to the Twitter section. This is slightly different. We aren't collecting threads in this case from the website. We're using the Twitter search API, and to use that we interact with it by using search terms. So as I mentioned, Ozpol is our Australian Twitter political hashtag, which most people use for their political commentary. Recently, there's also been some controversy or political controversy over, we've had some extreme weather or some flooding in Queensland and New South Wales in Australia. So what we could do if we're interested in seeing some of the conversation related to that, we can add additional terms into our search query. For example, we're looking for tweets made with the Ozpol hashtag, which also contain the term flood. We have various other options here. If you're not interested in retweets, you can turn that off. And there's various other parameters here which allow us to control our parameterize or control our query to the API. Once we've done, once we've filled in, we can also choose roughly how many tweets we want to collect. I might just collect 100 in this case. And oops, I apologize. I was going to say we clicked on collect tweets, but unlike Reddit, Twitter requires authentication with the API. So we need to add some means of authorization. So through the Twitter developer website, you can apply for API keys, and these will enable you to create an API access token, which you can enter into here. VOSON Dashboard can help you create the tokens you need to access the data. I've already created a token previously, so I can simply use that, and that will now fill out this field in our Twitter request. And now I can collect some tweets. So I simply click on collect tweets. It goes through and performs the collection. Again, we have some output. We collected 100 tweets. We can save the raw data again. There is a lot of metadata returned from the Twitter API, so we can selectively choose and export that if we wish. And again, the data is represented down the bottom here in this data table. We again can create a network. We have a few more options available. We also have two-mode semantic networks available for Twitter, which I won't get into, but we'll have a look at an actor network now. And again, we can add additional text to our network if we wish to for Twitter. We can also add user metadata. What this feature does is sometimes within our networks, there'll be relationships between users. Say if a user's mentioned another user, but we haven't collected any tweets from that other user. So we haven't collected any user metadata, such as how many followers they have or how many tweets they've made. So it's often useful to collect some additional user metadata, and we can do that using this option here. Again, we can create our network. We get some output with nodes and edge types. We can again save off various representations of our network, and we can again visualize it again in our graph section. If I just turn on node attributes, you'll see a whole bunch of numbers. Again, the data we collected was based on a Twitter search. So whereas previously we collected a whole thread, which naturally all the activities were related to each other. This is an API search where we have various users and their relationships going on here. And just because they all use a particular hashtag doesn't mean that they're related to each other, but we can see the relationships between groups or clusters of users in this case. And we can perhaps turn on edge labels, so edge type. And if we zoom in, we can see our relationships between users. We have different types of relationships here where one user's quoted another user. This user's mentioned this user. Here we see a number of mentions and so forth. Okay, I'll now jump to the second part, my second demonstration for today. I'll just go back to my slides. And I want to also show you, if you're not interested in using VOSON Dashboard, and perhaps if you're interested in R programming and doing more analysis on your own, you can still use the VOSON suite of tools, in particular VOSON SML. And I just want to show you very quickly how the VOSON SML package can be used to construct an egocentric network in conjunction with some other packages here, in particular RTweet, which is very popular for collecting Twitter data, very popular R package for collecting Twitter data, Viz Network, which we've already seen some results on, which creates really nice interactive web-based graphs, and dplyr and iGraph for doing our data wrangling, getting the data in the format that we'd like. So I'll just jump back. Now, some of you may be familiar with R Markdown files. It's just a file which contains a lot of code, which I'm going to now press the wrong button and confuse myself, but it's an R Markdown file. So basically it contains a bunch of code and formats it in a nice kind of presentation format where we can see the code and the output in one place. So I've just, all that code is just executed, and I'll just zoom in a bit so hopefully you can all see that. And this example of some coding. There's not very much coding here to achieve what you want, but for example, if we're interested in egocentric network 1.5 degree, which is a network of a Twitter user, an ego, in this case, VOSON Lab, and all of its alters and the relationship between its alters. Here we can very easily use RTweet, for example, and the get timeline function to collect the VOSON Lab timeline. We can create an actor network to get all of the alters for VOSON Lab. We can then go and collect all of the timelines for all of the alters to create quite a large network, but then we can do some data wrangling and some also enrichment processes here to collect some more user metadata, and then finally reduce our network to our 1.5 degree ego network. We can then use Viz Network to produce some nice interactive kind of graph visualizations, such as the one here, which is the ego 1.5 degree ego network of the VOSON Lab Twitter account, colored based on a clustering algorithm, which we applied, I believe it's the walk trap algorithm in this case. So this produces a rather nice kind of visualization, which can be embedded within web-based reports or web pages or applications. Just now back to my final slide. Here's another representation of the same graph, this time with profile images or avatars as the nodes. Perhaps unsurprisingly, central to this network is Rob Ackland, who founded the VOSON Lab. So it kind of makes sense that he would be there in the middle of our ego network. So I might just hand it back to Rob now.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brian.
Slides again?
Yes, please, if you could share the last two slides for us.
Okay.
So now, now you can see us, and Francisca's here as well. Once again, apologies about our, the VOSON software is really good, but obviously the Zoom installation on my presentation machine is not so good. But anyway, just about that Twitter network that Brian showed, all I can say is if you create a lab and you're not central in the ego network for that lab, then what's the point of doing the lab, creating the lab? I actually was concerned I was going to be an isolate, but there are some Twitter influencers in that network, and I'm not one of them, but I am right at the center, which is nice. Anyway, so Brian is now about to share
Sorry,
a couple
just getting organized.
Yeah, sorry. Well, just to wrap up, so we're 2 more minutes, and then we're going to throw it open to answering some of the questions. So So we've shown you the VOSON Lab tools, and some of you may be having questions. Well, okay, how do I get stuck into using VOSON? How do I learn about VOSON? So this is our resources page. We've got a website. I saw someone asked a question about other examples of research using VOSON Lab tools. Well, please go to the VOSON Lab website. There's almost 20 years of documented research there. We have GitHub pages, lots of documentation. There's also a code blog that I want to emphasize. This is where we're putting our sort of cutting edge blog posts about how we're doing our research. And then finally, Brian, if you could just go to the next slide, please. These are our contact details. And actually, I just want to also mention that we do teaching and training as well here. So we have courses that we teach. PhD students come and study with us. There's also a short course that Brian and I teach, and there's one that's coming up in July. So that's on the previous slide, but please follow that up if you'd like more information, and also contact us. We learn more about what people are doing, and that helps us to build the software better.